Now on a special edition of KGW News, excitement in Rip City and beyond with the Trailblazers in the playoffs for the first time in 5 years.
They need the momentum. They need the emotional support from all of us.
But first, a troubling trend along the coast with more gray whales dying and washing ashore.
We're even only a small way through our normal peak period of strandings for gray whales.
Plus, how a federal judge's ruling pushes back on the federal government's efforts to change healthcare.
Looking for a problem, making a problem in order to have a problem.
And later, a moment to reflect and remember the nation's first veterans.
The revolutionary generation fought to create a nation worth improving.
Thanks so much for joining us here at 11. I'm John Adams. Our top story tonight, 3 more gray whales have been found dead on the Washington coast. That brings the total to 14 across the Pacific Northwest this migration season. I spoke with a research biologist to find out what they believe is going on. Marine researchers in the Pacific Northwest are sounding the alarm as dead gray whales continue to wash ashore. So far this season, 12 have been found dead in Washington, 2 in Oregon.
The common theme is most of them are malnourished, are in extremely poor body condition.
John Kalambokides is a research biologist and founder of the Cascadia Research Collective, a group that studies gray whales in Washington. Kalambokides says gray whales have been found dead in Ocean Shores, Deception Pass, and Squim Bay since Friday.
Everything we have is pointing to a crisis on the feeding grounds in the Arctic, and decreased prey up there now forcing gray whales to search for alternate areas to feed, not be able to quite survive their normal fasting period.
Gray whales feed in the Arctic from spring until late fall when they make the journey to calving lagoons in Mexico. They typically return to the Arctic between April and June.
The whales dying now really reflects how much food they got last year.
The amount of deaths this year in Washington is concerning researchers. Only 4 to 6 die on average per year on the state's coast. Even more troubling, NOAA scientists say the overall population is rapidly declining.
Their estimate from last year, the most recent count they've been able to do, showed the gray whale population had decreased over 50% in the last 10 years.
Kalambokides believes climate change is the main culprit, warming Arctic waters and reducing food sources for gray whales.
In some of the areas that gray whales had fed extensively 20 years ago, 30 years ago, surveys in those areas are showing a dramatically lower density of prey.
A reminder of the fragility of the world's ecosystems.
Some of these changes occurring to our climate, especially in the Arctic, are having some pretty huge consequences.
New tonight out of Cowlitz County, police in Washington are investigating a crash that killed an 18-year-old high school student, and they believe alcohol was involved. Around 8 last night, Cowlitz County Sheriff's deputies were called to a crash involving one car near the intersection of Rose Valley Road and Maranatha Road, a private gravel roadway. There they found one person trapped under the car who was pronounced dead at the scene. He was identified as Eldon Ragsdale, a senior at Mark Morris High School. The driver stayed on scene and cooperated with investigators. 3 other youths who were in the car were taken to the hospital. An update to a shooting investigation in Vancouver. Police there now say the victim, a 20-year-old man, is not expected to survive his injuries. Officers were called to a parking lot off of Southeast 118th Avenue and Mill Plain Boulevard around 2:20 Saturday morning. That's where they found the victim, but the suspect had already left. Detectives are asking for any witnesses to share what they know, including video evidence at or near the shooting scene. And new back in Multnomah County, 2 people were rescued from the Columbia River today after their boat caught fire. First responders were called out to Hayden Island area where the 2 had escaped the fire and were on a dinghy. The boat that caught fire has since sunk. An environmental response is now underway. And in Salem, people at a church were asked to shelter in place this morning while police responded to a suspicious package. It was reported just before 8:30 in the area of 4th Street Northeast and Channing. Bomb experts were called in and confirmed the package did not contain any explosives. Police are looking into who left the package. All right, another day filled with some sunshine and warm weather. And for the second day in a row, we saw highs jump into the 70s today. And it sounds like Monday is going to be just as nice. Meteorologist Joe Ranieri has more on what the work week is going to look like. Hey, Joe.
Hey there, John. Well, here's the best way to break your forecast down for Monday. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit cooler and cloudy, but temperatures will be above average. That's what we've been experiencing here the last couple of days. We have this ridge of high pressure that will be in place for tomorrow, but we also have this upper level low that's going to be bringing in increasing clouds throughout tonight and into tomorrow. You can kind of see that counterclockwise rotation moving through, bringing in some good amount of showers throughout parts of Medford and along southern Oregon. The radar is picking up a little bit of some precipitation right now, but it's really not going to be adding up to much over the next couple of days. Even on Wednesday, when I'm tracking our really next wet system, really late Tuesday and into Wednesday, but rainfall amounts are going to be relatively light from what we were experiencing earlier last week. So as we bring in the futurecast tomorrow, we'll be looking at mostly cloudy skies, a few light sprinkles here and there, and that is about it. And then there's a chance to see some showers increasing by the later part of the day tomorrow. But I think really after midnight, John, is when we'll be starting to see our next system move onshore, bringing in kind of scattered showers throughout the day on Tuesday, and that carries over into Wednesday. But we warm up once again by the later part of this week. I'll let you know how warm coming up in a few minutes.
All right, Joe, thanks so much. We'll see you soon. New tonight out by the coast, a landslide has shut down a portion of the Clatsop Loop Trail at Ecola State Park. Oregon's Park and Recreation Department says they don't have a reopening timeline at this point and ask people to avoid the closed off area, specifically the trail north of Indian Beach and south of Hikers Camp. Tonight, a major escalation in the Middle East. President Trump saying earlier the military has hit and seized an Iranian tanker. Posting on social media, the president said the ship tried to evade the U.S. blockade. This comes just days before the current ceasefire agreement is set to expire. Tonight, the White House telling NBC News U.S. negotiators are headed back to Pakistan tomorrow. But ahead of that, President Trump once again threatening to wipe out civilian infrastructure if the two sides don't strike a deal.
We have a long history of taking down bridges, power plants, and other infrastructure that is powering Iran's military, and they have a long history of conflating civilian and military assets.
At this point in time, it appears Iran hasn't agreed to show up. State News reporting tonight that any confirmation of a second round of negotiations in Islamabad is not true. A federal judge has blocked an attempt by the federal government to penalize healthcare providers that offer gender-affirming care to minors. Oregon led that lawsuit along with 21 other states. RJ Coulter has that update.
The ruling stems from a declaration issued last year by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That declaration would have allowed the federal government to cut funding from hospitals providing gender-affirming care to minors. A federal judge says HHS doesn't have that authority.
We'll take this win.
LGBTQ advocates relieved by a federal judge's ruling striking down a declaration made by HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That declaration read in part, quote, "Sex-rejecting procedures for children and adolescents are neither safe nor effective as a treatment modality for gender dysphoria, gender incongruence, or other related disorders in minors, and therefore fail to meet professional recognized standards of health care." The policy would have given HHS power to exclude hospitals and healthcare providers from Medicare and Medicaid programs if they continued offering gender-affirming care for minors. The lawsuit argues HHS did not have the legal authority to make that change. And the judge agreed, writing in his opinion Saturday, quote, "Despite repeatedly emphasizing their commitment and obligation to protect children, defendants have sweepingly wielded the Kennedy Declaration to threaten children's hospitals that provide life-saving care to children."
There's so much intentionality, so many steps that folks have to go through to even access gender-affirming care, much less benefit from it.
In Oregon, gender-affirming care is protected under a 2023 state law requiring insurance coverage for medically necessary treatments and shielding providers from out-of-state legal challenges. Attorney General Dan Rayfield applauded the ruling, writing, quote, "When families and doctors make healthcare decisions together, no federal official should be able to use threats and intimidation to get in the way. That's what Secretary Kennedy tried to do, forced hospitals and providers to abandon their patients."
Being able to continue accessing that care and building that foundation in the state of Oregon will only help young people thrive in this state.
And the court had already blocked the policy during a prior hearing, but this decision makes that ruling official. The Trump administration has not yet said whether or not it will appeal this ruling. Back to you.
All right, Jake, thanks so much. Well, check this out. In Beaverton today, people gathered for a dedication ceremony in honor of the nation's first veterans.
The ideals that the founders wrote down were bold, but they are not yet fully lived. Centuries later, we know that freedom and fairness is not experienced equally by everyone in this country.
It was a chance for people to remember and reflect at Oregon's brand new Revolutionary War Memorial, unveiled today at Veterans Memorial Park. It's the first of its kind on the West Coast, just in time to mark the nation's 250th anniversary.
This is the last monument that we're installing in this park. This park is complete. Ironically, as our Adjutant General just said, it's the last memorial recognizing the first patriots and first veterans of our country. So if you've never been to Veterans Park, check it out.
Alongside local leaders was the Lewis and Clark chapter of Sons of the American Revolution, donning period uniforms of the Revolutionary War.